be seated. Pranam, Jai Guru, and loving greetings to everyone. You know, the divine joy that is emanating from you is so palpable and so powerful that for me to say it's a joy to be with you, it's an understatement, because it's an intoxicating joy to be with you. And I think it's probably because we've spent 7 beautiful days together, isn't it? Praying to God, singing to God, immersing our minds in the soul awakening teachings of our divine Gurudev Paramahansa Ji. And I think that most importantly, as we meditated together, I think that each one of us in our own unique way felt the grace of God stirring within us, uplifting us, inspiring us, and transforming us for the better. Don't you think? And you know, it's so inspiring for us monastics when we see that spiritual radiance aglow in your faces, in your eyes, and in the joy of your smiles. And we feel it when we're with you. And one more thing. As we meditated together, I think we strengthened that divine bond that's unbreakable, inseverable bond that exists as members of Gurudev's worldwide spiritual family. When we first arrived, after 5 years of not being here, wasn't it like a family reunion? So much joy. And you know, some of you shared that it didn't matter if you were here or if you were at home or participating from a center or a group. And I want to share with you what some of you have written to us. One devotee participating virtually from home said, instead of coming to God for 1 week, we learned to invite God fully into our everyday lives, into our homes, so He can be with us always. Instead of worshiping God in one location, we worshiped Him around the world, spreading His holy vibrations around the globe that needs it so much at this time. We learned to connect together, not only without, but also from within. And one other devotee said, and this is such a powerful insight, it is as if a portal into paradise swung wide open, revealing a glimpse of reality, that God resides within us, and that we can invite as much of that divine reality as possible into our lives. You know, these insightful perceptions so beautifully express what our Gurudev tells us is the purpose of life, the goal of yoga. He says, the purpose and goal of yoga is to regain the lost paradise of soul consciousness, by which we can know that we are and ever have been one with Spirit. So our talk today is aptly entitled, A Portable Paradise, Sustaining the Strength and Inspiration of Divine Fellowship Wherever We Go. And so the first point is that on this final day of convocation, let us not feel for even a split second that we're going to lose that feeling of closeness with that divine presence. Because if we continue to practice and apply what we learned this week, we can build on the blessings we received and on the momentum we gained and carry within us that portable paradise wherever we go and whatever we do. But we have to plan, we have to set the stage at home, isn't it, so to speak, in order to create a balance between our spiritual practices and the fulfillment of our daily responsibilities. And that's why you hear us repeatedly emphasize to establish a routine of meditation, because it lays the foundation for your spiritual life. And it anchors us in soul consciousness, and that's where we want to live. That's where we want to approach everything that we do, from that state of consciousness. And that state of soul consciousness deepens every day as we meditate. And you'll see that ultimately over time, that outer balance is going to automatically take care of itself. Why? Because God is watching. And because God reciprocates, blessing every little effort we make with ever deepening soul awareness and soul consciousness, so that we can stand firm amidst the breaking worlds, the crash of breaking worlds, as Guruji says. So let's first take a look at the outer environment, because if we can create one that's conducive to supporting our spiritual life, that's wonderful. But sometimes devotees say they wish they had a much more supportive home environment. And one devotee said, "You know, in my family, I'm the only practicing member of Master's teachings." We know that family situations can be complicated. And so, as devotees, we want to give careful thought to how we're going to navigate those family dynamics, isn't it? And you have to get creative, but one way I can suggest is to ensure that you fulfill your family obligations to the best of your ability. And when you're doing that, if at times it takes away from your time to meditate or any other study or spiritual practice you want to engage in, that's no need for us to be distressed about that. That's normal, and that's not really constructive, is it? So let's think about these points. There is nothing in this world that can keep our minds away from God, isn't it? We can always, when we're thinking of God, when we're longing to be in meditation, when we're longing to be quiet, when we're longing to love God, Master says, that is being with God. That is loving God. You don't have to feel that your love is just exploding with love. Just that little longing, God knows. And He receives that sweet expression. And let's think about this as well. The divine is very attentive to each one of us. No one's forgotten. He knows our every need. And His love is all-inclusive. No one's forgotten, naughty or good, and there's countless souls, and He loves each one unconditionally. And we are a spark of God. And it is for us to reflect that same attentiveness and love toward our loved ones. And when they feel that love from our hearts, they're naturally going to be a lot more supportive for our spiritual practices. I remember one devotee who had traveled here from Ireland. She was from Dublin, and she'd come to Los Angeles to participate in convocation. And she told me that her husband is not an SRF, but he's very supportive of her coming here, because he says when she comes home, she brings back far more love than when she left. And naturally, he and the children are the biggest beneficiaries of that love. And you know, when she said that to me, I thought, this devotee is a walking, talking ambassador for someone who's seeking God, for someone who's a yogi, practicing yoga, meditating, for convocation, she's a walking advertisement, isn't she? And for a blessed Guru's teachings. And I think that's something that we all aspire to be, a walking, talking ambassador, and most of you, if not all of you, already are. All right, so here's another point. As you continue to apply what you practiced here during convocation, you're going to continue to see many beautiful changes taking place in your life. If some flaw just sort of falls away, you didn't do anything to work on it, it's just sort of not there anymore. That's the blessing of the Guru and the grace of God upon your little effort. Sometimes it's a big effort that we make, but we'll see those changes taking place. But there's something else that you're going to become aware of. You're going to deepen your awareness of those undesirable aspects in your nature that are not aligned with your spiritual priorities. And so you have to think in terms of, when I'm aware of this, I'm not going to shy away from addressing them, so that more and more our beautiful soul nature comes to the fore. We uncover that and express that. And I'm sharing this because sometimes devotees don't quite grasp that working on ourselves, although I know all of you have heard this all week, that we have to make the effort to improve. And Guruji explains this in a very beautiful way. He says, yoga is not just a science of meditation. It is a science of self-transformation, of transforming the little ego into the pure divine self. That's our goal as well. He says an essential part of the yoga path is the conscious effort to improve and to spiritualize oneself. And he tells us how. He says, by exercise of the innate qualities of the soul. So we have to consciously do that. Be aware in every situation to try to express some soul quality. We'll talk about that a little more later on. And I think this is an awareness that we're all carrying in our hearts, and it has to expand, and we have to do more work in that area. But haven't you found that, generally speaking, most people in the world don't have any concept of needing to improve themselves, isn't it? That's just how I am, and take me or leave me, isn't it? One devotee told this story. He said, when I found Master's teachings, I was in high school, and at the time, my schedule was very tight. But since it was a priority for me to incorporate meditation into my schedule, I decided to eliminate those activities that were non-essential, and I set up a schedule that I could manage. One day, my father told my mother, "Our son's schedule is so tight that he's becoming robotic. Can you please talk to him?" When my mom asked me why I was regimenting my life, I replied, "Because I want to change." And my mom countered, "Change? Change what?" But seriously though, we are programmed, whether we realize it or not, whether we're ready or not. And especially because we have our blessed Guru who's prompting us, we're programmed to seek our innate, changeless soul nature and to free ourselves from limiting beliefs and behaviors. Because any aversion to doing that, any resistance, and the ego's always resisting, but any resistance stifles our soul. It suffocates our true nature. And it causes unhappiness and suffering for ourselves and for our loved ones. And sometimes that's all too real, and it's a very unpleasant state to be in. But the good news is that unhappiness and suffering are not permanent because we have a choice. And the greatest way to break free is meditation, to realize and bring forth our beautiful self with a capital S. And then after meditation, and you've heard this expressed this week, set a firm intent after your meditation. Reflect and think about it. Set a firm intent to behave rightly by expressing those soul qualities that produce happiness and harmony around us and for our loved ones and ourselves. So think about that. Incorporate that into the close of your meditation after you've sat for a while and you've communed with God. Then plan your day and set your firm intent. Guru Dev highlights a few qualities for us. And these are just a few, but he talks about many soul qualities throughout all his teachings. Inner calmness, pridelessness, quietness. That might be something some of us need to work on. Quietness. Humility, kindness, evenness of temperament. And he says these are the ornaments of right behavior. We can ornament ourselves with these and many other beautiful soul qualities, so that when people see you coming, they're welcoming. They want you to be in their presence. You're like a fragrant flower, and the perfume of your presence lingers with them, and they don't want to leave your presence. You want to be that sweet, sweet soul presence, reflecting God's beauty and His love. He says, live love. Practice it within and without, wherever you go. Give love and understanding. Be loyal to your true friends. And loyalty was touched upon this week. And at the same time, be a friend to all. You know, something happens in our consciousness where, I don't know, for me, sometimes when I'm out, if I have to do some shopping, I just feel love for everybody. They're like my friends. Because, you know, there's no real separation. That consciousness comes over you that we are all siblings, God's children. Some more awake than others, but each one beautiful. Strive to behold God as the hidden indweller in all souls. When you dwell on this, when you reflect that God dwells in everyone, even those who are naughty, you automatically feel respect, and you bow inwardly. They're struggling, but God is in them. And at some point, they'll break free. They'll break out of that. And when we stretch outside of our comfort zone, and we make allowances, even if someone we feel isn't deserving of it, we're evolving. We're changing patterns. We're evolving. And when we exercise self-restraint, even if someone's being very difficult, and it's really difficult for us, we're evolving. Trying to give the best response transforms us, so that our default behavior naturally becomes respectful, understanding, patient, and also positively constructive when that's required. Every little effort that we make to override the ego's reaction, that contributes to soul growth. And then we're more and more anchored in soul happiness and harmony. So next point. What if we find ourselves in a situation where those close to us place unrealistic expectations or demands upon us? Does that mean that we naturally set aside all our principles and our spiritual commitments just to please them, just to maintain peace and harmony? Not at all. This is when we want to apply discrimination to determine when we hold firm and when to compromise. And we can ask ourselves questions such as, does the interaction with this person constantly involve me in emotional drama, dragging down my consciousness? Or is this activity that I'm being expected to participate in or invited to join, is this conducive to my spiritual life? You have to make a decision. And when you're really pressed, somebody's really pressing you, just do what Brother Bhuvananda said. Well, I don't know how to explain it, but I'm not going. This is our Guru's guidance. Strive to be always with people who inspire you. Surround yourself with people who lift you up. Do not let your resolutions and positive thinking be poisoned by bad company. But listen to what he says next, because this never occurred to me. I've experienced it, but I never thought about it. He said, even if you cannot find good company, of course, that's not my problem. I'm surrounded by angels. They're sitting over there. He says, even if you cannot find good company to inspire you, you can find it in meditation. The best company you can have is the joy of meditation. That joy just levels everything. It cancels out negativity. It cancels out worry. It cancels out anything that will drag you down, because you're in your true nature, your joyous nature, and that's really untouched by worldliness. You know, Guruji faced similar challenges when he was young on the path, but he held to his convictions and he set the example for us to follow. This is what he said. He said, take no heed of the ridicule of your friends because you are different. They may laugh at you for being interested in godliness. I like that. I'm interested in godliness. That's a beautiful perspective to hold. And you may smile at them for being foolishly materialistic. Now you notice he didn't say you may argue with them for being foolishly materialistic. Smile. That's the attitude, isn't it? That's the soul attitude. Doesn't matter. Smile at them. And here's another approach. If you quietly follow the teachings, and if you can hold your point and demonstrate poise, kindness, and tolerance, your ridiculing friends will admire you inwardly and eventually emulate you outwardly. I've seen this happen many, many times in the lives of devotees where their families took note. Guruji said, when I started on the spiritual path, I was treated as an outcast in my own home. But later, here's another approach and attitude. But later, when my silent spiritual tenacity showed visible results in my nature, then most of my relatives became my disciples. So you see, in our own quiet way, holding to that spiritual tenacity and holding to our principles, we are presenting to the world a much improved, more beautiful version of ourselves. And we could even be a blessing to our family, inspiring them to follow in our footsteps. You know, many years ago, another sister and I had the opportunity to travel to Europe to conduct a 4-day retreat in Italy and in Sicily. And when we were at the open house in Sicily, there was a group of teenagers waiting to greet us. And one young man stepped forward, and immediately I felt this peace and calmness emanating from him. And then he spoke and he said, "Sister, this Saturday, I'm taking Kriya Yoga initiation." And he was beaming when he said that. I know, I saw how much it meant to him, so I commended and congratulated him. And standing just behind this young man was an older, distinguished-looking gentleman. And he stepped forward and he said, "My name is Paolo, and I am the father of this young man. And I am here because I want to see what my son is doing that has caused him to change so much from what he was like before." And then he added, "So tonight is my first lesson in yoga." Beautiful. Not only did the father witness his son's transformation, but it impacted him. Because when he said, "Tonight is my first lesson in yoga," he could very well have been saying, "Tonight is my first lesson in how I can change, just as my son has changed." That's the impact that we can have. And not only did that young man's spiritual efforts transform him, it changed the entire course of his life, because I'm happy to report that now he's a monk. One of Master's little boys. All right, so another point of how we want to create that outer environment that supports our spiritual efforts, and that is to study. And we've heard that repeated this week many times. But again, to recap, it establishes that link, that attunement with our Guru's cosmic mind. Many of you know that our revered Mrinalini Mataji was not only our late Sangamatan president, but she was also the chief editor of Guruji's writings. And one day, after she had been working on one of his manuscripts, she put it down and she said to me, "God has poured an avalanche of truth and power through the channel of the Guru to help us in countless ways." An avalanche of truth and power. And isn't it true? Whatever you pick up to read, it's like an infinite library of wisdom and guidance to illuminate our path. And so, if you study something every day, as Brother Bhumananda said, it's like you're sitting at the feet of the Guru. You have not only darshan, but he's instructing you. And if we are receptive, he will impart to us exactly what we need at any given moment. And you know, you've all experienced that in one way or another. I want to share with you his beautiful words that go deep and that tell us what's really taking place when we have that attunement with the Guru and when we study his beautiful words of wisdom. When soul talks to soul, when my spirit talks to your spirit, the words that you attentively listen to will establish an inward silent attunement and communion. And every spark of truth that's gone within remains with you. Remains with you. If you keep in tune, you will find that when you need guidance and help, those sparks, like dormant embers, will spring to life and action within you. I'm going to read that last part again. When you need guidance and help, those sparks, like dormant embers, will spring to life and action within you from studying. During one of the fellowship discussions, we asked the devotees, how Master's teachings had affected their life. And one lady devotee from Argentina, whose entire family, her grown-up children, and her husband were on the path, and she said that she'd gone on holiday with two devotee friends. They'd gone to a beach, and they were sort of isolated. There was no lifeguard on duty. And she decided to go out for a swim, and her devotee friends stayed on shore because they didn't swim. They weren't swimmers. And while she was swimming, she noticed that the current got so strong that it was pushing her out and away from where her friends were. And she swam as hard as she could, but she could not go against that current. And feeling very fatigued and unable to get back to shore, she said the thought came to her, could this be her time to die? She was desperate. And then the next thought, she said, was, should I continue swimming or should I surrender to the inevitable? When suddenly she felt Master's presence come over her. And then, before her eyes, she saw an image of the words from the lesson she had studied that morning that said, death cannot ensue as long as there is the will to live. She said at that moment she felt this surge of energy and she began swimming her mightiest, and she got close enough and shouting out to her friends, and they came in close enough to help her back to shore. So, I ask you, in one word, what is the moral of this story? One word. Study. So we've talked about creating an outer spiritual environment. Let's now recap what a strong inner environment looks like. What do we mean by a strong inner environment? It means cultivating an inner life where you and God live together. Where you commune with Him, where you keep Him uppermost in your heart, and where you place Him first, last, and all the time. And I think that this week we gained a deeper understanding of why meditation is the greatest gift we can give to ourselves, isn't it? Because in meditation, we enter the sanctuary of the soul. And that sanctuary is a haven of safety, of solace, of comfort, of strength and protection, because that's where God dwells, within us. And in that sanctuary, we can drink deep from that inner reservoir of soul strength to help us cope, especially when life's challenges threaten to throw us off balance. And the peace that we feel, that comes over us, that bathes us from God's embrace, When we bring that peace out into the world, it shaves off the edge of stress and it helps us rise above the fray. Now, our problems aren't going to miraculously disappear, but our awakened intuition that happens in meditation naturally helps us to see and to manage people and situations with a clear mental lens, instead of reacting from the ego's emotions. However, something miraculous does happen, especially when we practice Kriya Yoga. What are we doing? We are re-architecting our entire neurology, systematically eliminating all those undesirable habit patterns that are lodged in the brain. You know, it can be likened to clearing out the old files from your computer and replacing them with new ones. Higher spiritual priorities, new behavioral habits, and manifesting our soul qualities. It's much easier after you've cauterized those undesirable patterns in the brain. And it happens if we give ourselves every day that great gift of meditation. Guruji says, never begin or end your day without communion with God in deep meditation. Listen to this. We could not perform any duty without the power borrowed from God. We're sitting here because God is giving us life. Really, He's the doer. And when we meditate, we realize that more and more. You know that great saint, Anandamoy Ma? She said, the greatest delusion of all in man is to think, I am the doer. So Guruji says, it is to Him we owe our first allegiance. And listen to this thought, because it hadn't occurred to me. If you do your duties but forget God, He doesn't like it at all. And when we find ourselves in trouble, stumbling, making mistakes, giving into temptation, to our weaknesses, why is that? Because we've forgotten who? We've forgotten God and the power that He gives to us, the life and the love He gives to us. And this is so beautiful. I know there is a law, Guruji says, by which God directly supports that devotee who depends solely on Him. Depends solely on Him. He says, the power that supports your heartbeat certainly knows your lesser needs. Isn't that precious? I mean, really. If you live solely for God and have faith in His power, He will give you direct help. So we want to make a plan imbued with devotion to make Him the center of our life. And we do that by inviting Him and involving Him in all our endeavors, in all our activities, so we don't forget Him, because He doesn't like that at all. And we do this during good times and bad times. Doesn't matter. Just invite Him and involve Him. He likes that very much, Guruji says. Gurudev also said, you know, most people turn to God only when there's trouble. But what did Lahiri Mahashaya say? If you don't invite God to be your summer guest, He won't come in the winter of your life. What words of wisdom, isn't it? But when we make God the center of our life, asking for guidance in all things, we find that He reciprocates, responding to the deepest prayers of our heart and to our deepest needs. I'd like to share an example of someone who made God the center of her life and who was deeply influential and inspiring to me personally, and that was my maternal grandmother. She was a spiritual seeker throughout all her life, and she followed different paths in a constant effort to seek a deeper relationship with God. But throughout all those years, she cultivated a profound prayer life where she was in constant conversation with God. When I was a young teenager, I'd watch her like a hawk. And I would see her lips barely moving, and there was this light and joy in her face. And sometimes when our eyes would meet, she knew that I knew that she knew what was happening, and I somehow shared in that communion. And that inspired me. Her spiritual journey reached its zenith when she found our Guru's teachings, and she became a Kriyaban at 75 years old. A significant event occurred when my mother, her daughter, was diagnosed with severe calcification of the aortic heart valve, and the recommended treatment was surgical. And this was in the late 1970s, and there was only one surgeon in the nation that was skilled in aortic valve heart replacements, and he was based at the Texas Heart Institute in Houston. So upon the recommendation of the California-based doctors, my mother, my grandmother, and I went to Houston. We admitted my mother into the hospital where she would undergo evaluation and testing. And we prayed together. That night, we meditated, actually, and said a prayer for my mother. And when I said the closing prayer, my 4'11" grandmother stood up. And she began to pray in a way that I had never heard before. She began to address Christ directly, invoking His presence. And she said, "Lord, you, only you can heal my daughter. Heal her heart, Lord. Make her whole and perfect, that she need not go through this surgery. She is my daughter, but she is also your daughter. And you have healed so many others. Heal her as well. With the almighty power in your healing hands, you heal her." And she went on like that for I don't know how long. It was so intense the way she churned the ether with her prayer. But this I did know, that God heard her prayer. And He was going to respond in some way. The next day, late in the afternoon, after all of the testing and evaluation had been done, my grandmother and I went to see my mother. And the moment she saw us, she said, "Guess what? The doctors are somewhat confounded because they can't find any calcification on the valve." I don't have to have surgery after all. And before I could say anything, my grandmother said, "Thank you, Lord. Thank you, thank you, thank you." When I returned to Mother Center, I told Mrinalini Mataji what had happened, and she said, "Well, dear, it seems as though God had no choice but to grant your mother's prayer." And for me personally, to witness someone so close to me, and that wasn't the first time, but this was special, to witness someone so immersed in God's presence, churning the ether with her prayer, talking directly to him, not only changed my prayer life, it changed my whole life. And even now when I'm praying and I find that my prayers are lukewarm, I visualize that little grandmother of mine standing on the brink of eternity, face to face with the Almighty Creator, letting him know what she needs next. But I want to share with you what Guruji says about prayer, because I think it's going to open up an understanding that maybe we didn't have before. He says that for a child of God, true prayer is the demand of our soul. He said that we ought not to pray like beggars because, and this are his words, you have a divine right inherited from God to demand from him, and he will respond to you because you are his own. You have a divine right inherited from God to demand from him, and he will respond to you because you are his own. Take that in. There's a time to love God. There's a time to demand, and it's okay. I remember once in satsang, our beloved Dayamataji said that once we have connected or strengthened our connection with God in meditation, that's the time to churn the ether, shake the heavens with our prayer. She said the habit of inwardly talking to God and loving him should be cultivated not only by those who live in monasteries, but also by those who live in the world. Ma said, I do not think there is a moment in my life that I'm not talking to him. I do not think there's a moment in my life that I'm not talking to him. We have to reach that state, don't we? There is no time when we ought not to be silently conversing with God. There is no excuse for not doing so. No environment, no activity can keep us from God. So now you have no excuse. Simply tell God in your own words quietly, unheard by any other, that you love him. Tell him when you're sitting in silent meditation. Tell him. Tell him when you're on the busy street or at your desk. I love you, God. I love you, my Lord. Let this be your last thought tonight before you go to sleep. Try it. It's so beautiful. The greatest joy. And in another satsang, Dayamataji said, if you churn the ether with your prayers for 15 minutes every day, it will change your life. Lastly, we could not end our convocation without offering our humblest and profoundest pranams to our blessed Guru, who came to help us on our journey back to God, who came to hasten our soul evolution and so that we could find eternal freedom in him. And in these sentences, he describes the role he came to play in our life. Tune in with the Guru. He has been sent by God to help you over the rocky places on the spiritual path. By your inner attunement with the Guru, his mentality will become a greater influence in your life, and you will find freedom. God may be silent, but the Guru will give you straight talk about what you need to do to change, to improve. Guruji said, I found freedom because I listened to my Guru. This is his straight talk to us, isn't it? And our participation in convocation fulfills our Guru's wish that we might receive his message of a loving God who can be known, a God who loves us and wants us to love him and know him. And we are so blessed to have heard that message, isn't it? You know, there are thousands, millions really. I was corrected by one of the brothers when I mentioned that. Millions around the world have read Gurudev's writings, especially his autobiography of a yogi, and they become fans of the Guru. I've heard some of them say to me, I love to read Yogananda's books. And they become his fans, and that's good. But we cannot remain fans of the Guru. We have to become his followers, his true disciples, immersed in the conviction that he intimately and lovingly and caringly directs the course of our life. Brother G last night told us that the great ones are directing the course of humanity, of the world's evolution. And God has sent this Guru to us to direct the course of our life and to smooth the way for us. And we've been given everything. Gurudev said, every saint who has come on earth has contributed toward the fulfillment of God's desire for the spiritual upliftment of all human children. He says the great ones come with two purposes. And before I tell you what those are, think of the life of Jesus Christ. Think of the life of Bhagavan Krishna, of Mahavatar Babaji, Lardi Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, Divine Gurudev. Think of their life. He says the great ones come with two purposes: to inspire a large mass of people. Those are the fans, perhaps. And to train real disciples. Those who pattern their lives after the masters. The latter constitute the saint's true family, in whom he plants his spiritual life. We are members of our Guru's true spiritual family, in who he plants his spiritual life. To do this is difficult, even for a God-realized master. And yet, by striving to humbly walk in his footsteps, he will impart to us, and he is imparting to us, he did this all week, the secrets to the mystery of life and to our freedom. You know, often devotees express the wish, oh, I wish I could have been with Guruji when he was alive in physical form. And yet, look at all of us here and all of you who are participating who know Guruji. We never met him in the physical form, did we? And yet we see how he continues to bless and transform our lives. Plus, we can feel his presence, isn't it? At the same time, you know, in some circles, there's this notion that you have to have a living guru in physical form in order to receive initiation, in order to receive guidance, in order to be liberated. And in my early years, I was one of those people. I wanted a living guru in the flesh. But I want you to know that Guruji never taught that. He taught that the relationship between guru and disciple exists on a high spiritual realm, uncircumscribed by time and space. That's where we live with him. We walk around encased in human form, but that relationship, that communion, that link, that exchange takes place on a high soul realm. You know, one of our respected monks, the late Brother Turiyananda, and some of you may remember him, even knew him. He shared an experience that took place prior to his entering the ashram. And at that time, he was very new on the path. He just started the lessons, and he had not fully grasped that a true guru is ever living. He lived in Switzerland, and at the time, he had attended a satsanga conducted by one of India's revered modern saints, Swami Ramdas. And he was visiting Switzerland at the time. And after the satsang, Brother Turiyananda wasn't a monk yet, but he went up and asked the Swami for initiation. And Swami Ramdas looked at him and said, "Do you have a guru?" And he said, "Yes, it's Paramahansa Yogananda, but he is dead." That's Brother Turiyananda. And Swami Ramdas replied with fiery words, "You are dead." Your guru is alive. Follow him. The great ones, true saints, they understand. The guru is divine consciousness, encased for a time, in human form, but always enjoying omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, and infinite love and bliss and joy that he imparts to his beloved disciples. Listen to Gurudev's promise to us. Even when I am gone, my help will always be given to devotees all over the world if they keep in tune. Never think for a moment that when I am physically absent from you all, I am not otherwise with you. I shall be just as deeply concerned for your spiritual welfare when I am no longer in this body as I am now. I shall always be watching over each one of you. And whenever a true devotee thinks of me in the silent depths of his soul, he will know that I am near. So, dear ones of God in Gurudev, let us now close our eyes. And for a few moments, let us go within and visualize the Guru at the Kutastha Christ Center in your mind's eye, or visualize him standing up here on the stage, pranaming and blessing you. And from the deepest recesses of our heart, let us silently express our profoundest and humblest pranams, our deepest gratitude, our love and loyalty to the one whom we are blessed to call Guru, to the one who removed the veils of delusion and are leading us safely on our journey back to God. So let's just take a few moments to offer this to Gurudev. Continuing with closed eyes, let us listen to these parting words of our blessed Guru. It is my privilege to bring to you a message that will help you realize God and to develop yourselves harmoniously, physically, mentally, and spiritually. The blessed role of Kriya Yoga in East and West has hardly more than just begun. May all people come to know that there exists a definite scientific technique of self-realization for overcoming all human misery. Hundreds of thousands, not dozens merely, of Kriya Yogis are needed to bring into manifestation the world of peace and plenty that awaits men when they've made the proper effort to reestablish their status as sons and daughters of the Divine Father. I am deeply grateful for your devotion and strength of spirit and for the words that came from your heart. I am proud to be with you all, and I'm always happy to be reminded of my great duty to all my brothers and sisters of the world. So now, dear brothers and sisters, let us close our beautiful convocation by invoking God and the Great Ones and offering them a sacred vow from our hearts. Please pray with me. Heavenly Father, Mother, Friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Bhagavan Krishna, Mahavtar Babaji, Lairdi Mahashai, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, revered and blessed Gurudev, Paramahansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we bow to you all. Beloved God, I take a sacred vow. Never shall the sun gaze of my love sink below the horizon of my constant thought of thee. Never will I lower the vision of my lifted eyes to place it on aught but thee. Never will I do anything that reminds me not of thee. Peace. Amen. May God and the Great Ones bless us all. Jai Guru, Jai Guru, Jai Guru, Jai Guru.